This is going to be a much shorter video that's just a little bit of an addendum to my last one, and in particular really just an addendum to the parts where I was talking about my conversations with Ellie Dangor. And it is really directly addressed not just to Ellie Dangor, but also to Chris Lipe, who I know really twisted Ellie's mind and deceived him in a lot of ways, committed things that probably legally would have been defamation if I could get any sort of written record or proof or testimony from Ellie about the things that Chris said to Ellie. But the point of this is not to delve into the legal stuff and the ways in which Chris could possibly be in legal trouble if I had the right evidence. But to talk about things more from a sort of information point of view and perspective about ethics in ways that I've talked about before. So the thing here I would stress is that after I posted what I posted on that last video, which by the way is the first time I ever mentioned Ellie. I never mentioned him in the blog before. Ellie got upset and started arguing with me again on Facebook, and I posted in the comments of the last video the first thing that Ellie said to me and my response. That actually wasn't the end of the conversation. Ellie continued to berate me and, in his mind, prove me wrong further, and I didn't entertain that conversation for very long. I basically told him I was going to mute him, and eventually I did mute him. And he continued to rant at me. I didn't even see the last of his several messages, but I do think that just through notifications I got, the last message he sent me even might even include the word checkmate, because in his mind he thinks he proved me wrong and wanted to use a chess metaphor of that. I don't really care about what he has to say about this anymore. But I also want to be clear that I'm trying to show mercy to Ellie now. I strongly believe that if I were to take the full transcripts of our original conversation from several months ago and the follow-up conversations after that, including his final rant at the end of there, and make this whole thing public, it would only vindicate and validate my descriptions of this whole situation more. And to anyone who is capable of rational thought and looking at things in terms of evidence and not in a sort of Trump-esque mindset of having been just detached from reality, would be on my side. Now, there are other people like Ellie, maybe like Winter, maybe like other people in this community who have been deceived to a certain point, who would take Ellie's side because they are emotionally caught up in that same sort of thing. But the point I really want to make here is that if you look back at what I've written, including the stuff in the ostracism, which of course I wrote much earlier and didn't even publish until 4 years after the fact, but everything I've written, every way I've behaved in telling these stories, I have been very consistent from the beginning. I have been giving the exact same rationales. I've never changed my story once. And everything I've said has been so consistent. And I would hope that people who do delve into the details see that this is clearly the sign of a truth teller. Someone who's never told a lie, never had to change his story. Yes, I may have made a few mistakes along the way because I had limited information or missing information, and I updated my views based on new information. But basically, I never had to change the heart of my story or the heart of my rationales because I have been speaking the truth the whole time. Meanwhile, the people on the other side, not just the clinchies, although it's certainly true of the clinchies, but also people like Ellie or other people who keep on arguing against me, keep on switching their rationales once they get disproven, and just trying to give a new rationale. And it's basically like they're making up their minds about who is the bad guy or the good guy based on emotional factors, and then supplying that rationale after the fact. Trying to figure out what rationale can I put in place to make the guy I want to be the good guy or the bad guy. I think this is true of a lot of people. That they basically come to their decisions about who they like, who they dislike, who they think is in the right and wrong in situations on completely emotional factors, and anything that they think is a rationalization is something that comes after the fact. And while that is true of a lot of humans, it is not true of me. It is not true, I think, of a lot of people who work in very rational mathematical fields, people like software developers, people like mathematicians, both of which I have been. Is that I very much try to look at things from a rational point of view first, look at the evidence first, and make my decisions about who I think is the good guy or the bad guy, who is in the right or wrong in the situation based on evidence. And that is exactly what justice is supposed to be about. I actually posted not that long ago on Instagram a picture of a picture frame with a text statement in it. It was in the courtroom the last time I had to be in the courtroom here in Portland. And I've actually taken photos of many similar things in other government buildings. And if you look at the halls of justice, the halls of all these government buildings, there's things all over the place, etched on the walls, about the idea that justice is about following the law, following the text, following the facts, not following our emotions. There's also a great quote in the Quentin Tarantino movie, The Hateful Eight, where the Kurt Russell character talks about the difference between justice and frontier justice. The fact is that it is very much embedded in our cultural ideas of what justice is and supposed to be. That we're supposed to make our rational decisions, we're supposed to make our justice decisions on the basis of the facts, on the basis of reality, on the basis of rational measures, not emotional ones. And one of the things I think is really sad is that we've gotten to a place in our society where so many people are getting unhinged from reality and only working in this emotional sphere, and they think they're dispensing justice. They think they're dispensing morality. They think that they actually are arbiters of morality when what they are being arbiters of is not morality at all. Morality is 100% a matter of rationality, 0% of emotionality. And I mentioned this in the comments of one of my previous videos. This doesn't mean that emotionality is unimportant and that we should ignore it and be completely callous to other people. What it means is that the actual evaluation of situations in terms of who is in the right, who is in the wrong, when punishment should be given, is entirely a rational process. It has to be about looking at facts and evidence. It is very clear to me from what I've learned that NASPA's process, and I'm guessing the process of a lot of other Scrabble organizations behind the scenes in terms of how they decided to punish me, was almost entirely an emotional process rather than a rational one. Quite simply, people didn't care about the facts. They didn't care about proving what I had actually done and the ways in which it was supposedly a violation of any kind of code of conduct. They decided they didn't like me enough. They didn't feel safe around me enough that they had the grounds to ban me from the game. And quite simply, I am not responsible for your feelings. You don't get to ban me for your feelings rather than what I did. Now, legally, you do get to ban me from a private organization, right? NASPA has the right to ban me from their organization for whatever freaking reasons they want, as much as they're irrational ones. However, if you want to uphold your organization as a legitimate sporting organization, as a legitimate competitive organization for a sport, then you need to actually try to be rational. You need to actually try to be just. And the point is, you're not even trying here. You're showing a complete lack of professionalism as an organization. And quite simply, anyone who is making these kind of decisions on an entirely emotional rather than rational basis should not be allowed to be on the disciplinary board of any organization, not just in Scrabble, but in any organization whatsoever. You have to make your decisions in a rational way rather than an emotional way on a disciplinary board of an organization. Otherwise, you are being unprofessional. And I want to tell you, I'm not putting more of this conversation with Elie out there because I just want to show mercy. I want to stop at this point, and he's a kind of minor player in the story. And as much as I do think he is morally liable for the ways in which he got detached from rationality, and I don't think this is the beginning of him doing that, by the way. Even before he and I got into a tiff about my stuff, I think there are other things he did wrong before while he was Westbrook president that were not bad intentions on his part, but because of how much he was a gullible sap, and he actually did things that undermined the integrity of the game, in particular with regards to reversing a decision of a particular cheating incident at a world championship, that were because he is able to be fooled by people because he is not rational enough. So I'm glad he's out of power, but I'm not going to go into more details about that. What I was going to say, though, is as much as I kind of loathe that, I do feel there is moral culpability there, I feel like the real bad guy in this mini-story within this is Chris Lipe. Really, Chris, by spending so much time deceiving him, you thought you were protecting your friends, but you weren't doing right by anyone in this situation. You ended up creating this unhinged person who is much less rational and much less a capable human and Scrabble leader now at this point, much less a person who's going to be wise in terms of how he invests his money in Scrabble in the future. And you also, in trying to protect Evans for all these years, withheld from him information that he could have used to learn and grow. And I'm not 100% sure. You've been a lot more in touch with Evans in the last few years than I am, but I do suspect he actually is not as bad a person as you are, and that if he had more access to this information sooner, he would have grown up sooner. He would have learned from his mistakes and improved his behavior, and you actually didn't show him the maturity of saying, hey, wait a minute, I'm not going to shield you from the truth. I'm going to let you see it so that you can improve yourself. So you did wrong to Evans, you did wrong to Elie, you did wrong to me, and you did wrong to the Scrabble community as a whole to get it to a less rational and more corrupt place, all out of your desire to help your friends. Chris, I believe you are literally evil, and you are literally a complete moral relativist, and quite simply, I hate you, but as I said, I'm not really emotional about it anymore. I just want to show everyone the rational truth of what a bad person you are and make sure that you are completely out of Scrabble power. As I said, completely off the Westman board, but also never in a position of Scrabble leadership again, because you are unfit for that job, and any community with you in a powerful position is a worse place because you will always lead it in an immoral direction. That's how bad a person you are.